Potzdamer Platz's success starts out as a simple crossroad for a Berlin city gate. In 1838, the Potsdam Railroad Station opened and is what is now known as Potzdamer Platz. Shortly after, it quickly transformed from a rural area to bustling squares of Germany. During the 1920s, Potsdamer Platz became one of the most traveled places in the world, and even obtained the first set of traffic lights in Europe. However, the 1920s was a time of hyperinflation and an economic crisis for Germany, notorious for its requirements of cartloads of money to buy average-priced items. And during World War II, this once bustling and exciting square was bombed. The only buildings left standing in 1945 were the Weinhaushof and the Hotel Esplanade. So keeping the current Euro crisis in mind, one must wonder if the current commercialism of Potsdamer Platz is more important than staying true to Berlin's history and culture.
When World War II ended, the city was divided, and the ruins of Potsdamer Platz became the first area to become a border triangle in the American, British, and Soviet market. This area was changed once again in the Berlin blockade of June 1948, causing even more tension in the area. The border was only marked by a small asphalt line in Potsdamer Platz. The general public believed that the area would be built back as before, and though the government started, Potsdamer Platz was left in ruins once more in the East Berliners' uprising of June 17, 1953, in which violence occurred and buildings were burned. After this occurrence, the remaining buildings were destroyed. Everyone began to lose faith in the square, and it was left in ruins for many years to come.
In 1961, Potsdamer Platz became a border zone for East and West Berlin as the wall was raised. Every building in the square was torn down as both sides of the wall's populations grew smaller and smaller. West Berlin had to remove any remnants of buildings so they didn't form a danger space. Potsdamer Platz thus became an urban wasteland for 3 decades. However, even as an empty void, it was still a popular tourist attraction for being an area that included Hitler's bunker, the Royal Palace, and the Wall.
On November 9, 1989, when the Berlin Wall finally fell, Potsdamer Platz was once again desired as the center of the city. A couple days later, parts of the wall were torn down and the road was started to be paved. In 1990, Pink Floyd held a concert in no man's land Potsdamer Platz titled The Wall, and turned out to be the largest concert in rock history. As mentioned in New Germany, the unification of Germany was not, of course, the only change that came about at the end of the Cold War, but it was a highly significant one. Not only did the German population increase to over 80 million, making it by far the largest EU member state, but Germany was provided with an opportunity to turn eastwards and devote its attention to rediscovering its markets in Central and Eastern Europe.
Berlin decided to rebuild the no man's land and sold plots of land to 4 large-scale companies to start in the postmodern architecture Berlin possesses today. These companies included Mercedes-Benz and Sony. This led Potsdamer Platz to be the largest construction site in Europe. This constant building and urbanization caused Germans to believe that Berlin was becoming something more like an American city or a German Chicago, leaving behind the diversity and living, breathing street life they had wanted Berlin to possess once more. The city's goal of a popular street scene seemed to be left behind as the companies demanded 11,000 parking spaces and large plots of land. The economy was focused less on internal German affairs and more on the rebuilding of the city, be it with European companies or not. However, some believe that the rebuilding of Potsdamer Platz was helping the Berlin population forget the hovering ghost of Nazi Germany that particularly swayed that area.
Today, Potsdamer Platz is once again one of the most bustling squares in Europe. It is now a large business hub, hosts many cultural events, and is one of the most commercial squares in all of Europe. However, its commercial enterprises are no longer feeding money into Germany, but into the world. Mostly lined with chain stores and restaurants, it has lost most of its original identity that once made it the center of Berlin's activity. It is now a commercial enterprise of a neighborhood. The city has attempted to add grassy areas and less modern buildings, but it will never be the same. as Europe's economy as a whole. Large companies and more money being spent was not what Germany needed during the Euro crisis, attempting to avoid repeating their past overspending mistakes of the 1920s. Potzdamer Platz is currently a one large construction site, which is not good for an old city like Berlin's original identity, but it shows that there will always be room for change. In 1910, Karl Schleffer said a phrase that will always be quoted to characterize the city's constructive tendencies, stating, "The tragedy of a fate that condemns Berlin forever to become and never to be."
It's a terribly over